When we perceive selfishness or a lack of empathy from our partner, it can be very natural to wonder if they are a narcissist or not. As a therapist who works on boundary issues with people quite a bit, and also as a survivor of narcissistic abuse myself, I have so much empathy for what you may be going through if you're wondering that about your partner or your relationship. Today, I want to talk about 5 things that I would encourage anyone with that curiosity to deeply consider when they're looking at their relationship. Now, to be clear, this is not a 5 ways to tell your partner is a narcissist, and it's also not a 5 ways to piss off a narcissist. This is more of a deep dive video into some of the deeper relational things that we need to consider if we suspect we might be in a relationship with a narcissist. So, if you're looking for more of a deep dive, then I encourage you to stick around. Now, the first thing to think about is use of the word narcissist at all. So, over the last 8 to 12 years, the word has become a lot more prevalent in the United States. And with political goings on such as they are, that's not likely to change anytime soon. In my experience, though, the word is often misused and frequently weaponized. And I think we really need to think twice about doing either of those things. And so, if you're going to use the word narcissist, I think it's important to A, be pretty well informed about what version of that word we're using. And we'll talk about that here in a second. And then also be pretty clear about what your intention is for using that word, because often we think it's a good idea to call someone a narcissist, but that may not turn out like you think it's gonna go. Now, the second thing is to consider how you're using the term at all. If you're just pulling the term narcissist from the vernacular to describe someone who's particularly self absorbed or focused on their own needs, then that's one thing. The other is using it in the context of narcissistic personality disorder, or NPD, I'll call it. And that's actually a diagnosis that you can find in the DSM. And here I've got my diagnostic manual here. And there's a list of 9 characteristics. And I won't go into all of them, but they include things like a grandiose sense of self importance, requiring excessive admiration, uh, a willingness to exploit other people, lack of empathy, things like that. There are 9 of them. And to qualify for an NPD diagnosis, you actually need 5 of those to occur in a pervasive way. Now, let's talk about that for a second. So, to begin with, you can't diagnose your partner with NPD. That needs to be done by a qualified mental health provider. And if you are one of those, you know why you still can't diagnose your partner. But that needs to be done by someone who is trained and licensed to make an appropriate diagnosis, because all of those 9 characteristics, most people show those in some ways at some point in their lives. But a pervasive pattern of these things is quite different. And it really takes the experience of a qualified mental health provider to really differentiate between the two. About 1 in 200 people will qualify for an NPD diagnosis. And realize that the diagnosis is a personality disorder. And what that means is that it is so built into their psyche that it is considered part of their personality. You can't tease their behavior out from their identity as a human. And that's a pretty high bar. And so for someone to have NPD, it needs to be truly pervasive, and it needs to be diagnosed by a qualified mental health provider. Now, number 3 is that I don't think the DSM really captures the essence of what it's like to be in a relationship with a narcissist, even someone who may meet criteria for NPD. When you read those criteria, they kind of focus on the self-centered, arrogant components. Now, those can be a pain, no doubt, but being arrogant and self-centered doesn't make you a narcissist, at least in the clinical sense. And for my money, it's not even the most difficult, toxic part of those relationships. You see, a narcissist can actually seem very put together and confident. That's their coping skill. And the problem is that on the inside, they're often the opposite. It's a very chaotic, insecure existence for a narcissist. And so the way they handle the chaos, the way they find some kind of stability, is they do it by bringing other people down, putting themselves above those people. Now, there are some very understandable techniques that they will use. Some of those fall into a category that we call gaslighting. Now, I did another video on gaslighting, and I'll put one of those little cards up above so that you can click on that, or I'll also put the link down in the comments or in the description so that you can click on it later if you want to see it. I encourage you to check out that video as well. But gaslighting is generally a way that someone will try to undermine your confidence in your own sense of reality or even your own mental health. And there are lots of really effective ways they can do that. And when they do these things, you can feel kind of like a crazy person. You really can. And that's one of the toxic traits of a narcissist that I think makes it far more difficult to be in a relationship with that person. Much as I talk about the value of empathy in a positive relationship, the absence of empathy can be a toxic trait in a relationship with a narcissist. So it is the power seeking, the manipulation. Often it'll go like this. They might instigate conflict. They'll push your buttons over and over and over again. And then when you have an understandably strong reaction to having your buttons pushed, then they pull back and they'll say something like, hey, don't you think you're being a little emotional here? You really need to calm down. And that's just one of the many ways that can really undermine your sense of stability in the relationship. And it is the power seeking and manipulation that I see as the true toxicity in a relationship with a narcissist. Number 4, and this may seem counterintuitive at first, but stick with me here. I often question whether it's useful or advisable to call a narcissist, especially to their face, even if it's true and even if you really want to. Here's why. Let's say that we're dealing with a person who maybe has some narcissistic traits. Maybe they struggle with empathy. They get a little arrogant and self-serving, but they don't meet criteria for NPD. Well, that may mean that they have the potential to develop some empathy. Maybe they need to work on it. But if this is a person who has potential for empathy, compassion, connection, there is potential in this relationship. Then if you lob that particular criticism, again, that's a highly charged word in the world we live in today. If you lob that out there, that could potentially be so hurtful for that person that it is just completely destructive in that relationship and they walk away. And so calling someone a narcissist who may not have NPD may cut so close to the bone that it could be incredibly destructive. Now, let's say the person does meet criteria for NPD. I will acknowledge it can be incredibly frustrating and difficult to hold space with these people, no question. However, realize that if they meet criteria for NPD, that is a personality disorder. It is baked into their psyche. And so that means they have a lifetime of building their skills for deflection, manipulation, gaslighting. They're probably better at this stuff than you are at defending against it. And so either it's going to fall flat. It's just not going to register with them at all, which is going to be frustrating for you. Or if they do pick that up and run with it, there's a high likelihood they're going to deflect. They're going to gaslight. They're going to go to a lot of effort now to get you to believe that you're the one with the problem. They're not the narcissist. You're the narcissist. And they're usually pretty good at making that case. And so the question becomes, is it worth it to throw that word out there to then have to deal with either the frustration of it landing flat or dealing with the then onslaught of gaslighting and manipulation that could very easily follow? So here's number 5, and I'm going to be honest, it can be a bitter pill to swallow. But in the end, it's not about them. In the end, if you're going to be in a relationship with a narcissist, you've got to focus on yourself. Now, again, as a therapist who does boundary work with people and as someone who has been a victim of narcissistic abuse myself, I have so much empathy for anyone who is going on that journey. In the end, you can't control other people, but what you can do is you can do your own work. You can work on building and sustaining your own boundaries. You can do the personal work to understand what maybe drew you to someone that narcissistic and manipulative in the first place. You can invest in additional relationships that will give you the empathy and compassion that you crave and can help fill your cup. And when we do all of these things, when we invest in ourselves and invest in the breadth of our relationships, then we develop the strength to make some real decisions about how we want to move forward in the relationship with the narcissist. It can lead us to some tough choices sometimes, and I know that's often not easy and not simple, but it can lead you to decide if you're going to stick in that relationship and tough it out, or if you're going to seek other alternatives. And whichever way you go, then you can do so with enhanced boundaries and better abilities to protect yourself in any relationship. Hey, friends, thank you so much for being here. I'm always grateful for your time and attention. Please do leave comments below that help me decide what rabbit holes you'd like me to go down in the future. And until next time, be well.